When people think of Japanese RPGs on the original PlayStation, a few names almost always come to mind. Final Fantasy VII, Breath of Fire, Suikoden, which I don't have a copy of, but we'll put one here. And of course, more Final Fantasies. They were the games that defined an entire generation, but hidden among those legendary releases was another RPG, one that dared to do things differently. A game with a darker world, unforgettable characters, and one of the most unique combat systems the genre has ever seen. A game that, despite selling over 1 million copies and earning strong reviews, somehow faded into the background of PlayStation history. That game was Legend of Legaia. Released in March of 1999, developed by Procreon Studios and published by Sony Computer Entertainment, Legend of Legaia carved out its own identity in a market crowded with genre-defining classics. It wasn't content to imitate what everyone else was doing. Instead, it introduced mechanics that rewarded experimentation, built a world unlike any other, and delivered an adventure that still resonates with those who experienced it. It even spawned a sequel on the PlayStation 2 years later. So why is it that nearly 3 decades later, Legend of Legaia is rarely mentioned alongside PlayStation's greatest RPGs? Was it simply released at the wrong time? Did it live in the shadow of gaming's biggest giants? Or has one of the console's most unique adventures quietly become one of the most overlooked classics? Today, we're taking a journey back to rediscover what made Legend of Legaia so special. We'll explore its world, its unforgettable cast of characters, its innovative tactical art system, and why I believe this hidden gem deserves far more recognition than it receives today. So grab your Ra-Seru, we're heading to Legaia. Understand the story of Legend of Legaia. You first need to understand the world's most important beings, the Seru. Seru are living creatures composed of a mysterious jewel-like substance, possessing incredible power, seemingly endless lifespans, and the ability to bond with humans. They became the foundation of civilization itself. When united with a willing host, a Seru could grant extraordinary strength, allowing humanity to flourish unlike ever before. For generations, humans and Seru lived side by side in an era of peace and prosperity. Then, the mist arrived. Without warning, a mysterious fog swept across the continent, twisting the minds of the Seru and transforming them into violent, uncontrollable monsters. Once trusted companions, they became humanity's greatest threat, turning against the very people that they helped build civilization alongside. Those fortunate enough to already be bonded with the Seru suffered an even crueler fate. Their minds were consumed, leaving behind empty husks that wandered the world like living corpses, completely under their control of their corrupted companions. Civilizations collapsed almost overnight. A few survivors were forced into isolation, hiding behind enormous walls or natural barriers that could keep the mist at bay, hoping each day that they wouldn't become its next victims. One such refuge is the secluded village of Rimmel, where we meet our first protagonist, Vaughn. Just at 14 years old, Vaughn is already an accomplished hunter. Raised alongside his younger sister Nini by his father Val, he embodies the qualities of a classic silent protagonist, determined, courageous, and deeply compassionate. Although he rarely speaks, his actions consistently show his willingness to risk everything for those he cares about. That resolve is tested when Rimmel becomes under attack. Leading the assault is one of the game's first major antagonists, Zeto, a ruthless servant of the mist, who commands a gigantic Seru capable of smashing through the village's protective walls. As the village falls into chaos, Vaughn is mysteriously drawn towards the Genesis tree at the center of the village. There, he encounters Meta, one of the last surviving Ra-Seru. Unlike ordinary Seru, the Ra-Seru were somehow untouched by the corruption of the mist. Far rarer than they once were, these ancient beings retained both their intelligence and free will. Meta offers Vaughn a choice: to form a bond and stand against the spreading darkness. Without hesitation, Vaughn accepts. Their partnership marks the beginning of a journey that spans the entire continent. Together, they set to restore the dying Genesis trees, push back the mists, and uncover the truth behind the catastrophe that has consumed the world. Before long, Vaughn is joined by his first companion, Noah. Noah couldn't be more different from Vaughn, raised in complete isolation after being trapped in a hidden cave as a young child. She grew up surrounded not by people, but by nature. Her only family was a wolf, who formed a bond with a Ra-Seru named Terra, leaving Noah with almost no understanding of human society. She's energetic, fearless, and endlessly curious. Her complete lack of social etiquette often makes her seem rude, blunt, or intrusive. But beneath her rough exterior is an innocence and optimism that is impossible not to find charming. After escaping the caves, Noah crosses paths with Vaughn atop a mountain, where the two work together to defeat a powerful monster to restore another Genesis tree. Following their victory, Terra formally bonds with Noah, and together they join Vaughn and Meta on their mission to save Legaia. The party's final member arrives in the form of Gala, a disciplined warrior monk from the secluded monastery of Byron. Where Noah is impulsive, Gala is measured. Where Vaughn leads with compassion, Gala relies on discipline and unwavering conviction. Calm, stoic, and deeply spiritual, Gala spent his entire life training alongside his closest friend, Songi. Gala views the Seru with deep suspicion, and initially struggles to accept Vaughn and Noah's decision to bond with a Ra-Seru at all. To him, the creatures are responsible for humanity's downfall, and deserve to be feared, not trusted. Songi, however, sees something entirely different. Rather than fearing the Ra-Seru's immense power, he becomes fascinated by it. Believing strength is worth any sacrifice, he embraces the very force that destroyed the world, setting himself on a path that stands in direct opposition to Gala and the rest of the party. As Vaughn, Noah, and Gala journey across Legaia, restoring the Genesis trees, they aren't simply fighting just monsters. They're confronting a world broken by fear, loss, and corruption. Along the way, each of them is forced to question their beliefs, face their paths, and discover what it truly means to trust others in a world where trust nearly led to humanity's extinction. While many of the JRPGs of the PlayStation era were trying to follow the formula popularized by Final Fantasy VII, Legend of Legaia chose a completely different path. Rather than relying on traditional turn-based attacks with predetermined abilities, it introduced one of the most unique combat systems of its generation, and one that still feels fresh today: the tactical art system. At first glance, combat appears to be turn-based, but once it's your turn, the game puts the action in your hands. Instead of simply selecting attack from a menu, you're given a series of directional inputs, up, down, left, right, that you string together to create your character's attack sequence. The real magic comes from experimentation. Hidden within these combinations are powerful martial arts techniques. Enter the correct sequence of directional attacks, and your character unleashes a unique special move, complete with flashy animations and devastating damage. What made this system so rewarding was that the game rarely told you what these combinations were. There wasn't a convenient list to scroll through, or abilities handed to you after leveling up. Instead, you were encouraged to experiment. Every new combination carried the excitement of discoverability, and finally stumbling upon a brand new art felt like uncovering a secret that you had earned yourself. As your character grew and became stronger, you gained additional input slots during each attack. What began as a handful of simple strikes gradually evolved into lengthy combinations capable of chaining multiple arts together in a single turn. Planning your sequence became a puzzle of efficiency, finding ways to fit many powerful techniques as possible into one devastating combo. The result was a combat system that blended the strategic planning of a traditional RPG with the satisfying rhythm of a fighting game. It borrowed the idea of directional command inputs found in games like Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter, but transformed them into a thoughtful turn-based experience where every battle rewarded creativity, experimentation, and mastery. Even decades later, the tactical art system remains one of Legaia's defining features. It's a combat system that didn't simply ask players to choose their attack, it challenged them to create it. Looking back, Legend of Legaia is one of those rare games that feels as though it deserves far more recognition than it ever received. It combined a memorable cast of characters, a fascinating world filled with mystery, and one of the most original combat systems the genre has ever seen. Even nearly 3 decades later, very few RPGs have attempted to create what the tactical art system accomplished. Releasing during an era dominated by genre-defining giants, it would have been easy for a smaller title like Legend of Legaia to be overshadowed. Yet, instead of following the trends of the time, it took risks. It trusted players to experiment, to discover mechanics for themselves, and to become invested in a world that balanced hope, tragedy, and adventure in equal measure. That's what makes the game so memorable. It's not just the satisfying combat or the memorable soundtrack, feeling of discovering new art through experimentation, exploring a world reclaimed from the mist, and watching a group of unlikely heroes grow into the people Legaia needed them to become. Those moments stay with you long after the credits roll. For me, Legend of Legaia remains not only one of my favorite PlayStation games, but one of my favorite games of all time. It's a reminder that some of games' greatest experiences aren't always the ones that sold millions of copies or dominated magazine covers. Sometimes, they're the quieter classics, the games willing to take chances and carve out their own identity. Perhaps that's why, even after all these years, the people that remember Legend of Legaia remember it with such admiration. It may never reach the legendary status of some of its contemporaries, but for those who experience the world, its characters, its unforgettable combat, it's a game that will never be truly forgotten. Maybe that's the mark of a true classic. Not how many people played it, but how impossible it is to forget once you have.